Welcome, Michael at Wickerson Studios. I've been asked by a few people to do some kind of walkthrough tutorials from scratch in Grasshopper 2. So what you want to do is get your work in process Rhino up. You can find that online. Definitely this is for people that are pushing to look at the alpha Grasshopper 2, and then you end up typing in G2 and in the command line, and you will open up your window of Grasshopper. Now we may end up using Grasshopper 1 while we do this, and I'll open that if necessary in some of the scripts. First thing I like to do is go into View and make it dark mode, and I do like to show names, which is kind of a bifocal tool. And I want to set my window pretty much here and take a look into the text tab because I want to say what I'm doing, and I'm writing directly from looking at the elements, propositions in book 1 of Euclid's Elements. So what I'm going to do is just open this up, and what I also like to do is make this a little larger, and I like to say what I'm doing. So this is going to be book 1, proposition 1, and that's going to state to construct, and these are going to be very basic to start, and we'll try and do something an equilateral lateral triangle on a finite straight line. And what this is going to do is slowly build a vocabulary that will make you get a little better and better. So I'm just going to make that. I'm going to downsize this to right there. I'm going to shrink it here, and I'm going to, how would I go about making those two lines? Well, what I do to make a line usually right off the bat is I'm going to use the basic stuff, almost the same every time. I'm going to pull in a circle. I'll probably go back to vector, and I'll default to this point in case I want to play with a range. My radius, I'm going to keep all my numbers between -1 and 1 unless I have to move out. So there's a little fast tool for doing a slider hard code that way. If you didn't see what I did, double clicking //, and then a number will do it. You can also go into your params file and pull down a number slider, and then you're forced to go into here and set it to what you want. So you could just set that up and plug that in that way as well. Circle to start with. What I like to do is just keep things very repetitive and simple. Analysis is moved over here if you have the latest version. Evaluate curve. And evaluate curve, once again, treat that circle. Let's make it all size. And you can see that it defaults to pi, a percentage of pi in there. But since I want to evaluate a circle, I'm going to want to incorporate in params under input constant picker, which actually defaults to pi, which is really nice. And I want to do a nice little multiplication through my maths to make that actually make sense. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to pull the number slider, probably params. It'll be fine to pull a number slider here, and I can default that into here to evaluate at 0.5, 0, and 1. So that's many ways of doing it. Now, since you know you're going to want to go to 1, or let's say to 0, you could bypass all of this to start, but whenever we're dealing with circles, we can try that hard code again. 0, be happy with this point. I'm going to show you what we can do just from building from points. You can see it's highlighted over here. I'm just going to do a quick transform because these are basically how people kind of construct and deconstruct things. I'm going to mirror it and default it across. And then go back in a curve, and I'm going to build a line that will move from the old point to this point. Now, things you might want to use later are vectors instead of lines because these are just visualizing. But here's the line. You can always go in here and change it to a different color, let's say blue, so then we can see that's a blue line whenever we end up getting to it. It's not really that necessary. I'm just going to change black to back. Take that off. Actually, getting it off is always tricky. There we go. That resets it. You're back to black. And there it is, defaulting to orange. So there is our line. Now, how from this line, which is all we've made, would we be able to create an infinite line? Well, let's just make a circle, and let's take it from the point that actually is evaluated, which is nice, that one. And we can even simplify this more by saying that point is being evaluated. We could have done, well, there's so many different ways to do this. You could go in and say, okay, well, the other one that I want to evaluate it at is at this point as well. So I could just default, and there we go. We've got 2, And then I'm going to go back into Grasshopper 1 because the tools are here, but I want people to get in the habit of using Grasshopper 1 and Grasshopper 2. So this can be many ways of going about doing this. So I'm just kind of thinking myself through. Now I want to find this point, but I remember back to Grasshopper 1, and I don't have to search around too much for other things. In Grasshopper 2, there was an intersect. And if you notice, there's no intersections in Grasshopper 2, which is kind of at a loss. So I'm just going to pack this down to here. I'm going to just tuck it in about there and stretch it out. And that way I can extend my Grasshopper 2 all the way down to about here. But I know when I'm dealing with curves or intersections, there's this wonderful tool, Intersect, and you can literally drag from the ribbon tools up into here. So we can grab these two circles. Where do they intersect? This one and these two circles and the original circle. And you'll see that I get this intersection, and this intersection, which is kind of cool, from our original circle. And then I should be able to draw a literally triangle from 3 points. I can take all of these points. I can take my original point, and sometimes as I do that, I like to go back into params and grab a relay and tuck it in here. That way I can pull it up like that. And that's the relay, this one, and the points that were evaluated initially. And I should have my triangles. And that's giving me two beautiful triangles above and below. And I'm able to, I could have kept this and plugged this in, which would have allowed me to do a little bit of this wonderful stuff with this model. And I could also take this one through and make it move a little bit more about a triangle as that squishes in here. You can see how you start to use these models. Any information that comes in before here, or any number sliders, what's fun to play with is to type in range. We're doing this on most of my models, range from limits. We can take that from 0 all the way over to here, and there we go. You start to get a really nice difference. We can also change the count. We don't need that one there, but we can hit hard code in a count of 3, which I think always makes a model somewhat visual. And so now you see a range of that happening. And we can also slide back this data and use another range of coming in here and say, well, let's take this data and make it over to here and pull it back into here. And now, as I change this data, you can see I can start to roll it around. And models become incredibly complex and beautiful when you go into this. And if you wanted to take it to a -1, I'll be doing a similar thing in most files. And just really showing a playfulness of this as I can go in reverse rotation and full rotation. Now keep in mind, this is all on a 2D plane. But if we wanted to use this data, because we're working in lists and we're working in trees right near the end of this data coming out of here, trees coming out of these circles, it's nice to take that range and start to throw it up in the Z. And there you go. You've got it going into the negative. You've got it going into the positive. You've got some ways to make some beautiful geometries out of here. You could grab curves, surfaces, solids, and there is a nice surface tool here that you go from primitive from triangles, and you can take all those triangles and make yourself a really nice little complex little zigzag pattern here. And it, of course, gets a little funky when you start playing with this, but thinking about the model that initially started this, and then giving yourself a way to think differently and creatively in here. And if you start to lose what you're doing, you can always come back in, zoom extends all. And if you want to see, as you break things, because you have a variety, 12 triangles, they're actually making this up. That means there's coincident ones as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and they'll have a small 0 count because you're starting at 0 on the bottom. This is just a wonderful way to get thinking about making models. You can simplify it, playing around with your parameters, thinking about geometries, and all you're doing is pushing things into a 3-dimension. So we can take that range and feed it into the Z and see what it does. It produces a much smaller one because the numbers are smaller, between 1 and I can also put the range up, and I can play with the range maybe this way in the Y direction. Because our numbers are very small, it might be interesting to start adding trigonometry into these things. I'm not sure I'm very happy with that model and what's happening here. I do have several points that are listed to be together in these files. I can chase back the double circle as well and the range itself. And I can always go back to 10 model you start to get a very complex little step system that can be pretty interesting. These are all just something worth thinking about if you want to find pattern and then start to offset. Think of these as structures that might become interesting for you. Hey, I'm rambling on. I didn't really have a plan for this. I just wanted to say going in and playing with this and then allowing yourself a little freedom to mess around with a little bit of the ranges, you can end up creating some pretty cool works. Thanks for watching.